Hi guys, in this video we'll cover how to get every single schematic in Modern Warfare 3 Zombies updated for Season 2 Reloaded. And we'll also talk about the best way to farm them, so you can get these unlocked or you can help your friends do the same thing. We'll start off with the schematics that come from Tier 1 contracts. That's Deadshot, Speed Cola, Stamin Up, Brain Rot, and Napalm Burst. Now for farming the contracts that can get you these, I'd recommend spawning in with a Tonfa. That's the baton melee weapon, because it'll make the farm much faster. Now as you're going through the game here with what I'm about to explain, you'll also potentially run into just finding a free second weapon in a merc cache, so keep an eye out for other weapons on your travels, but otherwise the Tonfa will do you fine. Now for Tier 1 contracts, you're going to want to avoid doing the ACV escort contract because it takes the most time and it's the most fiddly. The only exception I would say for this is if you want easy chunks of flesh for a dog, which may be useful for farming higher tier schematics or if you're playing solo. But if you're co-op and you're just doing those tier 1s, you probably don't need to stress about this. I would also avoid Aether extraction contracts and defend ground station contracts unless you want to fight mercs with a baton, literally just with a stick. It's not very fun. I'd avoid it. When you start your game, complete the closest deliver cargo contract and it will hopefully bring you towards the right side of the map near the I-5 Hidika Farms grid square. Now you don't have to use that area for farming, but it's my preferred location. If the contract doesn't take you over there, no worries. You can just gradually make your way over there, doing another contract or two potentially as you go. Now we're going to use the LTV from the deliver cargo contract as our vehicle to get around. Now if you spawn in and there's no deliver cargo contract near you, just take any vehicle nearby to a bounty contract. And we'll be doing this one specifically because the Tonfa at base gray rarity with no pack-a-punch will still take out tier 1 bounties really easily. Just get up in their face and start whacking. And obviously if you spawned in with something like a green wrench or a blue wrench, that's going to make your life even easier. Now when you complete that bounty, you'll often find that there's another bounty very nearby. They often spawn in clusters, so you can go just rinse and repeat once again. And a tip also while you're using the Tonfa is if you melee the mangler's arm directly, you can one hit the mangler, which makes this a very, very quick farm. Mimics can also be one hit with a direct hit from the Tonfa to the face. But rather than trying to be too precise, just whack, 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 whack until the targets drop. The next best contract to run is the Spore contract, and I'd recommend that you make sure you have enough room in your inventory for inhibitors, as you'll want to stack those in your inventory so you don't have to keep running around back and forth. And then what you're going to do is just throw your first 2 of them out, run to the next spores, equip those inhibitors from your inventory, chuck those out, run to the next one, chuck those out, etc. And then reverse the loop that you've just done and whack, whack, whack through all of the spores all in one go. Now in some scenarios, you're going to end up with the merc contracts, for example, being the only ones around. And I would recommend that you run over to them and you activate them, but then you just cancel them so that the other contracts in the area can respawn. You'll only have 5 or so contracts spawning per area or per cluster. And as long as you're in this I-5 zone that I'm recommending, you'll see very consistently that canceling a contract will end up respawning a different contract that you would rather do. So rinse and repeat doing that, and that's how you farm your tier 1 schematics. Now there are a couple of schematics that can only be accessed via missions available within the game. The tier 3 Saboteur mission will get you an uncommon Aether tool at green rarity. For this mission, you need to complete an Aether extractor contract. So like I said, usually useful not to have the Tonfa when you're doing that one. And while you're doing it, you need to kill 15 mercs guarding the extractors, shoot down a reinforcement helicopter, and exfil with the uncommon Aether tool plans, which you'll get as a reward. This can be a bit of a fiddly mission to do because shooting down the reinforcement helicopter doesn't always track your progress. So I'd recommend, if you're doing it, being very certain that you're the one that gets the final bullet of damage on the chopper. And even when the chopper's disabled, I'd keep shooting bullets into it just to make sure that the game does register that you are the cause of the chopper's demise, rather than it just blowing up from natural causes or something like that. Now to get quick revive, you need to do the tier 5 chaperone mission. For this, you need to complete an ACV escort contract, which is again, ironically, one of the ones that we were avoiding for those tier 1 schematics. But as you complete that ACV escort, you're going to need to kill 75 zombies and keep the ACV's health above 50%. The good news is that the VR11 Wonder Weapon heals the ACV, so if you absolutely need to boost its health, you can use that. But you should be able to manage this if you're doing a tier 1 ACV escort just by using decoy grenades and refilling those as you go, and also using Casimir grenades, which will pretty much prevent all zombie damage from affecting the ACV while you defend it. You then need to exfil with the quick revive recipe that you get as a reward, and you'll have unlocked the quick revive schematic. Next up are the tier 2 schematics. These are raw Aetherium crystal, that's PAP level 1, Juggernog, PhD flopper, Deadwire, and Shatterblast. And these all come from tier 2 contracts. Now, tier 2 farming is fairly similar to tier 1 farming. However, there are some strats and some tips that you'll need to move much more quickly and easily through all of this. So I would still say that the Tonfa is one of the best weapons you can use. It's still super effective against bounty targets. However, you are going to want to pack a punch if you're in that tier 2 zone. And if you brought a different weapon into the game and you can't reliably upgrade its rarity, like it's still just sitting at gray rarity, now is the time to swap it for pretty much any other higher rarity weapon that you can find. Also, if you find an ammo mod on your travels here, it can be useful to chuck those onto your weapons just to help a little bit with crowd control as you're doing these contracts. Now, my preference for these is to stay towards the southern part of the tier 2 zone, as it has a good concentration of contracts that we want to farm, and it's also relatively easy to drive around down there. And when you're farming tier 2s, I think it's a really good opportunity to try and get some friends online and put them to work as well, helping you farm here. And if you don't have any friends that you can play with, maybe comment your Activision ID below and you guys can pair up from the comment section and try and find some teammates. Now, a good way to bait your friends into wanting to do this with you is that while you do these contracts, they can be on other areas of the map if they really want to, or they can be clearing ether nests and doing other objectives in tier 2, and they're still going to get the money from you completing all these contracts. And when you move from tier 1 to tier 2, you're going to be earning 3k per contract. So that's a pretty strong incentive for them to hop on with you, because they're going to end up really rich in that match. And if you die, they're there to back you up. Now, as you're playing, if you find any decoy grenades, 100% pick them up, and the same for Casimir's. And if you spawned in with decoys, I'd recommend always keeping one in your inventory so that if you run out or you accidentally pick up a different special equipment, you don't accidentally lose the decoys. Like, you can always swap back to those decoys and then go to an ammo cache to refill. I'd also highly recommend picking up Casimir's if you find them, or monkey bombs, like anything that's good for crowd control. Now, when you're doing those tier 2 bounty contracts, you're going to work away at it again with your Tonfa, but in tier 2, you're also going to face disciples on top of the mimics and manglers that we saw in the tier 1 zone. Now, if a disciple is healing itself, you need to either break its line of sight with you, which will stop it from sucking your energy, or you simply need to shoot it enough in the head to stagger it, and that will also stop its healing beam. You can use another tip from one of my tips and tricks videos here, which is that if you lean outside of a car window to shoot a disciple, it won't be able to suck you, and so you'll be able to get pretty much free damage on it while you're doing that. For more tips and tricks like that, click the link on screen right now or down in the description. Now, once you've completed your bounty, if you're in co-op, you're going to be in a really good position here, because you can have a friend ready to pick up that next bounty contract. And the way to reliably do this is, before you've picked up any contract, have you go to one bounty and have the friend go to another so that you know exactly where they spawn, and then have one of you pick up one contract and do it just instantly straight away, take that bounty down, and then as soon as it's finished, that next bounty will be available for them to pick up and they'll be able to grab it straight away, and you'll just keep a flowing conveyor belt of bounties going, and you'll get through the contracts really crazy fast. If there are no bounties available, deliver cargo is also a great option, because that one is very, very quick. And then the next one in the hierarchy, like I said before, is the spore contract. That's going to be your next best bet if none of the others are available. And as usual, if you see escorts and things, cancel those contracts to get others to respawn nearby. Now, because you're a little underpowered, I wouldn't try and do the Outlast or Weapon Stash contracts and actually kill all the zombies, but you can do them without killing. You just need to be inside the contract zone and it will still get you completion. So don't necessarily worry about taking down every single zombie in sight, but instead just focus on surviving and getting contract progress. And if the percentage isn't climbing, you can just move a little closer to it and it should then start ticking up. And those can be useful to do in a pinch. Now, there are also some contracts specific to the Act 2 missions. The first of these is Cryo Freeze. This comes from the Safe Cracker mission. For this, you need to complete a raid weapon stash contract, nice and straightforward, and you need to kill 30 zombies attracted by the safe drill, which should be very easy. You also need to prevent the drill from ever pausing, so don't go so far away that the drill stops working. You need to stay in close proximity to it and keep defending it at all times. And you can then exfil with the Cryo Freeze formula that you will get as a reward. You can also get the rare Ether Aether tool, which is the blue rarity wrench here from the tier 5 exterminator mission. And this is a very, very useful schematic to have, especially if you don't have any other weapon upgrades. So working your way through to Act 2 tier 5 is definitely worth doing. You're going to need to complete a spore control contract, and you'll need to do it under 2 minutes and 30 seconds, which, to be honest, is plenty of time, so long as you're doing that extra inhibitors trick like we mentioned in the tier 1 farming section of the video. On contract completion in 2 minutes and 30 seconds, you'll obtain the rare Aether tool schematic, and you'll then be able to exfil with it. Next up are the schematics that only come from tier 3 farming. Now, I've got an entire video dedicated to tier 3 schematic farming that I will link on screen right now and in the description down below. It goes into real depth on exactly how to do all of this super efficiently and solo as well, but I'm going to run through some tips here anyway. I'll zoom through. There's more depth in that other vid. So, first of all, if you see someone else completing tier 3 contracts in your game, invite them to your squad or request to join theirs, because you're just going to end up stealing contracts from each other and wasting more time in your match, and it doesn't hurt to have more teammates. Now, I'd also recommend you have a tier 3 dog for this. It makes your life a lot easier, and you can heal that dog with healing aura, by the way. That's another tip from one of my tips videos. Like I said, linking a bunch of those tips videos in the description. Now, for weapons, if you don't have anything good in your acquisition stash for upgrades, I would bring the RGL with you into your game, as it's probably the best utility weapon for the stun that you get once you've upgraded it once. But you will also want to have PhD, so make sure to buy that or bring in the acquisition for it. And for this update specifically, I'd recommend using the Haytaker with 12 gauge sludge, because it's now stronger than the Lockwood, and I've got a full loadout video for it on my channel. We're not going to do every single contract here. So for example, ACV escorts, if you see those, cancel them. They're just not worth the time in any scenario. But some of these other contracts definitely are. So deliver cargo is probably the best one. When you pick it up, there's sometimes going to be some special zombies that spawn here over to the right. So just watch out for those. This is the fastest way to get to the objective. It's a little risky, but it's definitely the quickest way. And once you get there, you can use your decoys or your RGL to stun the zombies blocking the garage doors so that you can get inside. Then obviously just hop in the vehicle, and you can either take the road path here, or you can follow my path off-road to get to contract completion. Now, once you complete this contract, get out of the vehicle as soon as possible to check your rewards, because zombies will spawn in that area to come and attack you while you loot. And I'd also highly recommend you run back through this courtyard here to refill your ammo at the ammo cache and get yourself some more decoys. You'll often have a contract spawning in that area too, so this can be just useful in terms of saving time. And one of the things that can spawn there is the raid weapon stash contract. Once you've grabbed it, run inside the building, activate the stash, and then if you go to the very top of this building and you head up on to the round roof, the zombies don't actually follow you up there, and you just need to run around in circles a little bit to avoid meat being thrown at you. However, in case this gets patched, I'm just going to show you gameplay of me not doing that, and instead I'm going to show you what it's like being inside. If you have weapons that can kill the tier 3 zombies like that Lockwood, which I mentioned I have a video on, you can just do that as the zombies are mantling up. And if you have an RGL, you can just stun them to stop them from mantling up, and then you can chuck decoys as well to keep the zombies off your back, and you can hop out of the window to grab more decoys at the ammo cache as you go. And while you're out there, if you've got a turret circuit, you can chuck that in too to clear pretty much all the zombies in the area. This one's a really, really good contract to do. However, an even better one I'd say is the Outlast contract. This is probably the second easiest behind the deliver cargo. There are a couple of different Outlast spawns available. And again, it's a great one to just bring an RGL to and run around in the area. You don't even need to kill the zombies, and you'll have a great time. It's such an easy contract. It's actually crazy. Just keep mantling and stay away from them. For spore control, this can get a little hectic, especially if there's a mega abomination that has spawned in the area that you're doing the contract. It's certainly a lot easier, I would say, if you do have access to decoys or Casimirs, but obviously those are going to be taken up by your inhibitor, so just be aware of that. I would run as fast as you can and throw all those inhibitors down. And again, I would make sure that you're not really bothering to shoot spores until you've thrown as many inhibitors as possible, because it's just going to waste time. And if you have a Mega Bomb, do not try to just like run past the Mega Bomb and chuck the inhibitors without paying any attention to the Mega Bomb. Like, you do need to respect the fact that it can just beam you down. So take your time here. You're not in a rush. You can afford to chuck 2 inhibitors and then dash out again just to let the Mega Bomb lose interest or whatever, and then you can keep going. Now, finally, bounties are a little bit of a kind of gamble, I would say. Sentry turrets are fantastic for them, but you won't always have a sentry circuit, right? So if you get a Mega Bomb and you don't have a sentry circuit, I would just give up on the contract. Just cancel it. Do a different one. If you do have a circuit though, whack it in and you'll be able to take that Mega Bomb down very, very fast. Juggernog suits can also be useful for this if you've got a Disciple or a Mimic or a Mangler jungler that has spawned in. But always, the turret circuit is the preferred method here because they're just going to melt things faster than you ever could. And that's how we're going to be farming those tier 3 contracts. But remember, I've got a full video going into even more depth focusing on this, and that's linked in the description. Now, there are some Act 3 mission rewards too, specifically Death Perception and the Wunderwaffe schematic. For Death Perception, you're going to need to do the Tier 1 Act 3 2-factor authentication mission. For that, you need to complete a Defend Ground Station contract. During it, you need to kill 20 mercs, and then you also need to maintain the computer's health above 60%, and that will allow you to exfil with the Death Perception recipe. And for the Wunderwaffe, you need to do the Tier 4 Holdout mission. For this, you complete an Outlast contract. You need to kill 50 zombies inside the corrupted space while you do it, and your reward will then be the Wunderwaffe DG2 plans, which you can exfil. Next up is the Red Worm, which will get you Flawless Aetherium Crystal Schematics, which is Pack-a-Punch Tier 3, the Scorcher Schematic, and you can also get the Gold Wrench, also known as the legendary Aether Tool Schematic from the Red Worm as well. The best weapon to use against the Red Worm is the VR11 now, weirdly, as it does massive damage against it in Season 2 Reloaded onwards. My recommendation for the Red Worm, especially if you're trying to farm it, is as follows. If you see a streamer online at any point and they're at the game's menu and they're loading into a game, queue up at the same time as them, because there's a chance that you'll end up in their lobby, or there's a chance that other people will have the same idea and they'll also be queuing, and they're probably going to want to do some of those harder objectives like the Red Worm. So this can be a really good way to kind of matchmake with good people without even having to like add them as friends and stuff. But regardless of whether you do that or not, as soon as you actually join the game, go into the text chat and ask people if they'd like to run the Red Worm with you at the end of the match. Even if you don't ask, a lot of the games I play have people running the Red Worm, like they're still doing that mission, and they'll announce it in chat, and you can absolutely join them. You don't need to be in the same party, you just need to grab the USBs, which I'll explain in a moment here. But definitely be vocal in text chat, and you can also just try and recruit people during your game as well. Now, assuming you're going to be doing this on your own, you're going to have to find 4 different USBs around the map. To know where these USBs spawn, you need to go to this location inside the Orlov military base and come into this room here, and you'll see 4 different locations marked on 4 corners of this corkboard, and there'll be a massive map in the middle. You simply need to match up the locations that you're seeing in the pictures on the corners with their corresponding locations on the bigger map. So for example, you can see that this location here is clearly a zoomed in version of this particular part of the main map. You'll also be able to tell from those pictures whereabouts your worm boss fight is going to be, but I've got an alternate method for that as well that I'll explain in a second. So once you've got your 4 locations figured out, you need to go to each of them, and when you get there, you'll find a little USB tower that looks like this, and you just go and hold square on it, and it'll take about 20 seconds, and then a USB will pop out, and you'll be able to pick it up. These take up 1 inventory slot each, so you'll need 4 inventory slots free in order to get all 4 USBs. Once you've got one, it could be Alpha, Beta, Charlie, or Delta, you just need to drive to the next and get that next USB, and do that all 4 times until you've got 4 in your inventory. Then, my method for knowing where the Red Worm is going to be is simply to look at my map for whereabouts I can see 2 ammo caches that have spawned in really close together. There's only a handful of spawns that you can have for this, but for example, the football stadium will either have no ammo caches spawned within it, and so you know that the Red Worm is not going to be there, or you'll have 2 very close together on opposite sides of the stadium, and that's a sign that that is the Red Worm boss fight spawn for that match. There are a handful of other spawn points, so here is another spawn point, and there's another spawn point just here. If you're struggling a bit to know where to look, it will always be relatively close to the storm in your game, so start looking from the storm and then sort of sweep the area nearby, and that should tell you which spawn you've got. The reason for this is that the USBs can only be activated once the storm has actually reached the boss fight area, so you need to let the full 45-minute game timer run out. You then need to let the storm approach the boss fight area that you are now standing inside. You need to let the storm cross over the little ether extractor computers that are buried in the ground, and then you'll be able to enter the USBs into the 4 extractors. This will start thumping the ground, and it will spawn the Red Worm in moments later. Now, the best way to be prepared for this fight is to buy a durable gas mask from the buy station in the tier 3 zone, and also to bring along a couple of sentry turrets, the kill streaks that you can buy from those buy stations. Those sentries are much more useful than having Juggernaut suits, so I would definitely recommend those. And it's also a pretty good idea to have healing aura on, because you'll probably have some teammates with you for this, and they'll need some heals during the fight. It's also one that the friendly dog is essential for because that will give you a bunch of free revives, so I would do that too. Now, if your weapon isn't packed to tier 3, you're probably going to fail, so you need to pack a punch your gun to tier 3, and I would also recommend making sure that it's gold rarity or purple at the very least. And if you're struggling to make that happen, earlier in your game, I would just go into tier 3 and buy a gold weapon off the wall, and then upgrade that rather than worrying about whatever your loadout weapon is going to be. Because ultimately that rarity is going to make a big difference, and it really helps having it gold. Now, during the fight, you're going to obviously want to put as much damage into the worm as you can, but you'll also want to periodically repair your gas mask by going and refilling your ammo at the ammo caches. And eventually, with enough teamwork, you'll be able to take the worm down and grab all of the loot. This will then spawn in an exfil point inside the boss fight arena for you to exfil from, so you don't have to go to another exfil on the map. Next up, there are 3 schematics that can only be accessed via the Dark Aether. These are the Aether Blade Case, the Dog Bone, and the Golden Armor Plate. I also have a full video of like 25 tips and tricks for farming in the Dark Aether and doing all of these contracts. But again, just to run through some information now so that you have everything you need to do it from one video, and you can get the deeper information from the video in the description if you want. I'd say that good weapons to bring include the Tear Akimbo because it melts special zombies, the Wasp Akimbo because it's just got a lot of ammo and it's really powerful and has high mobility. Now, the Lockwood is still powerful, but not the best after the new update, so while you can still use it, I would recommend the Haytaker with 12 gauge sludge. It's very powerful, especially with a large mag. And also, just as a bonus idea, you could use the flamethrower underbarrel, but this will probably get patched because it's so crazy OP right now. The Scorcher is fantastic because of the mobility that it provides for you, and it means that you can complete the Ether Extractors, for example, in seconds. It's amazing. The VR11 is really great for healing the ACV and melting Mega Bombs, and the RGL is just useful for stunning stuff. For equipment, I'd say Casimirs are great. They're probably the most important equipment out of everything. Turret circuits are okay, but they're not as useful as Casimirs here. I think that the Aether Blade is, again, all right, and sentry guns are all right. But if you get a dog bone, I would definitely recommend that because that dog in the Dark Aether is going to save your life so much. Now, to get to the Dark Aether in the first place, you need to complete the Act 4 story mission and kill the purple worm before you'll be able to get those classified schematics. I've got a guide for exactly how to do that because it's basically an Easter egg in itself on my channel, like I said, in the description or linked on screen right now. And once you've done that Easter egg, you'll be able to find tier 4 rift sigils from tier 3 contracts. You might need to farm them a little bit to get your first one, but you can always ask in text chat if anyone has a spare one that you can use. You'll also find an elder sigil from the first tier 4 Easter egg rift that you complete, and that will allow you to go into the tier 5 zone. And it's specifically that tier 5 elder sigil zone where you'll get those 3 schematics. But thankfully, the strategies that you use in tier 4 and tier 5 are actually pretty similar. You just need to do the tier 5 ones faster. So once you spawn in, you'll see bunnies fly to the left and then kind of middle right and then far right. There's 3 contracts you need to do. It's Ether Extractors, the ACV Escort, and Outlast. Some tips for the Ether Extractors is to go left off the spawn and follow my path to this building. Go inside and head to the roof and you'll be able to pick up the bunny. From there, you can go up to this rappel point to get to the rooftops nice and quickly. And then you can just chuck a Casimir down and interact with the rocket. And you can do that for literally all the rockets. It's a really fast way to get this done. Or you honestly might not even need to throw a Casimir for some of them. And boom, it'll be contract complete. This is the easiest one in my opinion. It's really straightforward. Now, while you're up there and you've completed the contract and you've done your looting, there's another bunny that you can grab. Listen for the sound cue, and if you can't find it, just follow my path here. Don't worry. That's going to get you the ACV Escort contract. This is the hardest one in the Dark Aether, and it's not so much that you're going to die, but more so the risk that the actual ACV dies. So what I'd recommend is you put a sentry on top of the ACV facing backwards from it to defend the back of the ACV, because the back of the ACV is where it's going to take damage, not the front. And sometimes you'll get turrets that will spawn on the ACV's path that you can use here to help you out, but they're not essential. Anytime the ACV is overrun and it's taking lots of damage, throw a Casimir straight away. And on the third and final stop, I would definitely look for a turret circuit spawn there, because that's going to make it a lot easier, because that third stop does take a little longer for the rocket to blast out of the ACV and for you to get your completion. Remember also, if someone has the VR11, now's the time to keep shooting the ACV and healing it as required. Once you completed that contract, continue running on the road in the direction the ACV was driving, and you'll be able to pick up the bunny from the bus. This is an Outlast contract. It is extremely straightforward. You just basically need to survive by running in circles in the room. You don't need to do anything special here. If you've got the RGL, you can use it to stun all the zombies around you just by spamming them, and you can also obviously use the rest of your decoys, Casimirs, monkey bombs, etc. during this contract. Now, running up these stairs and hopping off the railing will give you a nice little sort of stagger on the zombies and a good little loop that you can complete, and you just need to repeat that until the contract is finished. You can then exfil via the rift on the rooftop. It's a triangular rift up there, or via the underground. The new Elder Sigil Dark Aether gives us access to the schematics for the Blood Burner, the Mags of Holding, and the VR11. Now, similar to the original Dark Aether, some of the best weapons are the Haytaker with slugs, like I've talked about, the Flamethrower Underbarrel, the Wasp Akimbo, the Tack Eradicator, because it's got 1500 bullets in reserve, which is crazy useful, especially if you've got a Mags of Holding. The Scorcher can be crazy useful for this, for flying to the bunnies and just saving time. And then also as additions to your loadout, just keeping an eye out for sentry guns and Casimirs is a good idea as well. To access the new Dark Aether, you need to complete the new Act 4 story mission, Countermeasures, and do the Easter egg. And I've got a guide for this linked in the description and on the corner of the screen right now. Even if you've seen it, why not be a sweetheart? Go like that video and then come straight back here. Wouldn't that be lovely? A little good deed for the day. Now, a heads up for this is that the new schematics don't have a guaranteed drop chance. So the best thing that you can do is keep running through Elder Sigils and going through that new portal again and again until you get them all. And the actual process of doing that is as follows. There are 3 bunnies. The first bunny is in this warehouse nearby the spawn area, and it's just next to this little microwave in an office room. This is going to activate the bounty contract for you. Each enemy type that you could get from this is in a set location. So if you get the Disciple, it'll spawn up near the H4 grid square. The Mega Bomb will spawn inside the fog, etc., etc. And if the Mega Bomb's your target, you're going to want to probably bait it out of the fog just to make your life easier. And then I would lead it towards a building with a ladder. And make sure it's still aggroed on you as you climb, because if not, it might just run away and regen its health in the fog. But then you can shoot it down from up on that roof, and you can also use sentries here to make your life super easy. That is a really big pro tip for this. The second bunny is located on top of the mall. One way to get to the roof of the mall is via this van. You can hop up here and make this long jump to these boxes, and then you can just basically jump and mantle and parkour and do all that fun stuff up to the roof, and more or less just follow along with the gameplay here as I climb to the top. Now, there is also a route with a ladder, which is going to get you roof access. There are multiple ways up there, but you just need to grab the bunny. That's going to activate the Aether extractors for you. And the easiest way to do this is to use decoys and Casimirs and a bit of both, maybe some Aether Shroud. If you need specific guidance on the best way to do this, I've got a video which is the best way to farm schematics in the new Dark Aether. Woo! It's linked on screen and in the description down below. How crazy is that? It's like I've got a guide for everything. And the final bunny is located on this rooftop here, accessed by the ladder on the side of the building, and that will start an Outlast contract. The best way to do this is to make use of all of the obstacles like the counters and stuff like that inside the building and mantling over them to confuse the zombies. And it's also really useful to have a friendly dog or to have a brain-rotted zombie, or both, as a distraction to keep the zombies off you. Now, you can also camp in the kitchen in the back and stand in this little corner here to mow down most of the zombies if you've got a half-decent weapon, but bear in mind that it can get a bit sketchy in there, so your mileage may vary. You may just want to run around like a headless chicken. It works. And then once you've completed all those contracts, you just need to exit the map, and you can find exits in the following grid squares: C6, D9, I7, and H4 up on this hill.